Hello, this is Mwago David, your real estate and property coach. Today we're looking at something very important, and I think it's also important to you. 5 grievous mistakes you must never make when building or investing in real estate in Lekki. I'll tell you a story. About 8 years ago, there was this lady that came from the United States of America, and she wanted to build a house, a structure, 1 floor. And she approached me. I was handling another project on that street. So I told her to get an engineer to handle this for her. And she got this fellow, current trained, decent engineer to handle it for him. But there are a lot of mistakes and errors. We have good engineers in Nigeria, especially in Lagos. But we have some that are quacks. No apology. This young man collected money from this woman, and in trying to save cost, he did something shabby. As a matter of fact, over the years, after 8 years, the one I built for this lady was standing, while his had gone under the ground. What were the issues? Number 1, if you are building a house in Lekki, you must observe a 3 to 6 board raft, and you must take the road level. What is a raft? A raft is a concrete foundation in which every building in Lekki, I insist and I say it again, every building in Lekki must stand on. I've seen clients come to me that they want to buy a dry land because they don't want to spend so much money on rafts. And I told them, if you are buying a dry land or a wet land, you must do your proper raft without compromise. He did 2 board rafts for this woman. And after a while, there were cracks, there was a lot of issues, structural issues on this building. And she called me for a counsel 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I got to the building, I looked at it, and I gave her my candid opinion. And what was my opinion? That, madam, you must collapse this building. You must bring it down. She said, no, now how do you want me to collapse a building I spent over 20 million on, this and that? And she called another engineer that told her that she can remedy it by doing some, facial uplift, some facelift. And she called in this guy. After a year of facelift, the first rain came, it damaged the house again, and back to square one. And she called me at this point, that it's like she will go with mine. And I told her, candidly, she must collapse that building. Why? The guy only did 2 board rafts. And if you're going to build in Lekki or anywhere in Lekki at all, you must observe between 3 to 6 board. What are the factors that determine how many board rafts you should look at? Number 1, you must consider the road level. You must look at the government road. And now you take the measurement down to where you're building so that the water does not pour into your compound. Rather, it returns back to the major government drainage. Number 2, you look at the factors like who is your next door neighbor. If it's an uninhabited property, the fellow may be deciding to do 6 board, and you have done 3 boards. So what it means is that his wastewater will pour into your compound. The third factor you must consider when you are also doing your raft is what is the depth of the property I have. You must look at the depth of the water. If the water level is so high, you must go deep. If the water level is low, you must maybe consider something not too deep. But you must consider all of these factors when doing your raft foundation. Number 2, you must consider doing a pile, or what I call piling, if you are going to 3 floors. What is piling? Piling, unlike raft, is concrete and iron reinforcement into the ground. Have you seen a government bridge before? You see them building a bridge. What they do first, they leave to settle for a year or thereabout, is to do what I call piling. They open the earth, they search for rocks, and they search for solid ground, not a porous ground, to put and cast their reinforcement on so that it doesn't suffer a crack or it doesn't suffer failure. Where you go on 3 floors and not observing the piling, what happens over the years is that the building or the structure or the foundation may fail. And when it fails, that's where the building begins to tilt either to the right or to the left, and sometimes it may fail, where a building collapses. So you must observe some of these things when building in Lekki. You must not make these mistakes. Number 3, which is very important, You must avoid building on a government property where you hear committed land. You must avoid it, no matter how cheap it comes. Recently, in some of my topics, I've mentioned buying into a committed property and the kind of properties we have in Lekki. Anywhere you see a committed land, you must avoid putting your hard-earned income into it. Some properties are committed, but the government have not taken it yet. But trust me, over the years, 5 years, 10 years, the government will come for what belongs to them. And when they come for what belongs to them, they bring all manners of caterpillars and bulldozers. You see sometimes somebody say, oh, I invested 300 million, 500 million. That is you investing that money. But this is a government land for a government project, and they're going to come for their properties. So when you are building, you must observe these things, and where you may need to have a setback, you must have the setback. Why must you have a setback? Sometimes the government, you bought from the moneyless or bought from an estate, and government wants to expand the road. What they do is they look for the setbacks. And if you are building on a commercial place where you are building near a road, you must observe sometimes a 100-meter setback. This is for the reasons of land, road expansion, road network purposes, and cabling, and so many other things that may come on board, that may come up tomorrow. So when you are building, observe all these things. And that's why you must get professionals, not quacks, to work with you so that you can take note of these things. Now, I tell you this. A friend of mine a few years ago came and he said he wanted to buy a property. I sold something to him. Lovely environment, decent estate. And I told him some of the things, factors to take note of when building. Number one, I told him when you are building, you must observe about 6 board raft because of the porosity of the environment he bought from. And he said, oh, he had an engineer, that the engineer was going to put him through. And they started work. When it was the decking level, that's when I came back to the site. And I told him, sir, it's not too late. You can still bring down this building and reconstruct. 2 board raft will not work here. And he said, no, the engineers had advised me, don't worry about it. We'll know how to go and play around it. And he rushed it because he had the money. He roofed a painted, beautiful house. The first rain that fell, the man could not cope because the whole compound was like a beach. At that point, he had to rent another house outside of the estate before he collapsed this one to start reconstructing. So take note of these things when building. Number 4. When you are building in Lekki, you need to do what I call soil testing. The soil testing is what gives you the kind of texture of soil you have or the layers of the kind of soils you have. Where you have a soil test that failed, the engineers and the professionals will tell you what to do. If you are building without soil test and you are going a floor or 2 floors, very soon your building will fail. Now, when you are building, sometimes, because you are not the first person that bought the property, somebody had cleared before you came to build. Sometimes the sand field for you. You don't know the kind of woods, dead woods underneath the ground, and you begin to put buildings on top of those dead woods. It will only take 2 years or 3 years for those woods to decay, and as it decays, it begins to fail on the right, it begins to fail on the left, and sometimes in the center, that's where you see a building tilt. So the soil test will tell you the texture of soil you have, what you have on ground, the kind of buildings you can put there, the kind of excavation work sometimes to do, the kind of pile you will have to do. Sometimes it's not just a small piling, you may have to go deeper. So the soil test is what gives you the kind of things to do. So when you are building, you must take note of these things before you put in the first block or the first concrete. Number 5, if you are going to be building in Lekki, especially when it gets to your sewage or septic tank, you must ensure that you don't make a mistake or you don't miss it here. If you ask most residents in Lekki, in Lagos, they will tell you that the major issues all of them keep having, except a few, is bad septic tank or bad sewage. As a result of the soil texture and topography of Lekki, you may have to do a proper sewage and you must get professionals to handle it. This is the first issue or challenge you may have, is an issue of leakage. Another one, an issue of collapse. Another one is an issue of the top caving in. So when you are doing a sewage or septic tank, you must be careful to give it to professionals to handle. Most buildings, many buildings, because they don't do proper work in that sewage or septic tank, they have an issue of collapse, issue of leakages. Sometimes my neighbor living opposite my place, I've lived in my house for going to 18 years. He has just finished building. He just came in 2 years. He packs his sewage and septic tank almost every two weeks. Almost every two weeks because of the way it was handled. So when you are building, you must put into consideration professionals to help you handle your sewage and septic tank. And I'll give you this bonus. The sixth one is the water. Most of us in Lekki, most residents in Lekki have issues with their water. When you are building, you must consider the person to handle your water. The water is a major issue. You have brown water, you have the water they call iron water, all kinds of water. So if you are going to be getting your water, you must have professionals to, first and foremost, dig the borehole. Secondly, water treatment. You must treat properly. If not, you have most of the toilet damaged over the years. Thank you.